Friends, hello. Welcome to Voices for Earth Justice live on Facebook. I'm B.T. Irwin with Voices for Earth Justice, and this is my backyard. Hope you are enjoying the sunshine and warmth today wherever you are. And we are doing these conversations every Tuesday to keep you informed and inspired. Today, we are welcoming Brian Allnutt and Nina Ignaczak from Planet Detroit. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them in a second before we get into the questions, but I want you to know that you can post your questions too. If you're watching this on Facebook Live, all you got to do is type your question in the comment section. I'll see it on my screen, and then I can pass it on to Brian and Nina. Also, if you'd like more information about our guests today, you can visit planetdetroit.org, which you see scrolling at the bottom of your screen. And to keep up with Voices for Earth Justice and everything that we're doing right now, you can go to voicesforearth.org. That web address is also scrolling at the bottom of your screen. So today we're welcoming Brian Allnutt and Nina Ignaczak. They're founders and publishers of the Planet Detroit newsletter. Planet Detroit is marking its first anniversary this month in May. And if you care about the environment and you want the best weekly source of environmental justice news that affects Metro Detroit and the state of Michigan, you really should sign up for a free subscription to Planet Detroit right now. I give you permission to do that right now while you're watching this. You'll find the link to subscribe in the Facebook comments here in a few seconds and at the scroll at the bottom of your screen. Brian is a freelance journalist based right here in Detroit. He reports on Detroit, the environment, and food. And you'll read Brian's work in publications like City Lab, Curbed, Deadline Detroit, Detroit News, Metro Times Detroit, Mother Earth News, and of course, Planet Detroit. Nina Ignaczak, who is coming back, she's been on the program before, is also a freelance journalist who reports on the environment, food, history, place, and film. She's been an editor for Issue Media for 7 years and has been the managing editor of Metro Mode since 2016. She's the documentary producer for Real Films based in Hazel Park, Michigan. And of course, she is now the founder of Planet Detroit. So, Brian and Nina, it is good to have you here today. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Here. Thank you.
How y'all liking the weather?
Too hot.
Too hot.
It is hot. You can't. I've got a fan blowing on me right now. Can you hear the fan? Is the mic picking up the fan?
No, but it's good. It's good for your hair. It's a good look.
I'm saying it was too hot to sit out here in the sun without it. So just making you a little jealous. So the first question today, obviously, how are y'all keeping up with just the flood of environmental news that seems to be coming at us every hour right now?
We read a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking about this one, and and I feel like the issue it's not just all the news, it's the fact that so many of the stories that are going on, they don't just go away. So, you're talking about flooding, and it's not just like flooding happens one week and then it's not a story the next week. It's that you have all these different overlapping disasters going on, really, and kind of having to like keep all those balls in the air. So I think that's kind of the struggle as much as anything is, figuring out when you need to revisit or re-up some of these stories, because a lot of important things are going on right now, and you got to kind of keep it all in perspective.
Yeah, I would just add that we make a lot of decisions about what we're going to focus on and cover. Our goal is to focus on environmental news that's local. So that means that we're not going to necessarily talk about things happening elsewhere unless we can relate them back to what's happening here in Detroit. And often that's the connections are there. So what's happening in Midland definitely affects people in Michigan, across Michigan. But the fact that there's dams failing in Midland brings to light the fact that there's also dams that could fail in Metro Detroit. And so we try to focus on what's really local and trying to connect people that way.
my wife and I started watching The West Wing, which is a show that I never saw when it first was on TV. And we were watching an episode the other night, and they were talking about the news hole, right? Because you have, right. And I was like, is there even such a thing as a news hole anymore? Because it's
Wondering what
just
that
like
is.
with the constant flow of stories about COVID and, the floods and whatever President Trump tweeted 5 minutes ago. My wife and I, we were just talking about how we had totally forgotten about the city of Detroit overtaxing its citizens to the tune of $600 million. We just totally forgot about that because of COVID, right? So, with everything going on, what are the stories that you're most concerned that people are going to miss right now?
Do you want to go, Brian, or you want me to go?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess I feel like as environmental writers, we're kind of like used to this a little bit because environmental reporting is often thought of as like a subtopic. So continuing to press on climate change, for example, is something that we do, and so I think we're kind of used to that struggle, like especially with climate change, because that's always an afterthought against these more immediate problems. But luckily or unluckily, it's pretty easy to connect the dots between climate change and flooding or COVID, for that matter. That these are all phenomena that are likely to come more frequently as the climate changes. So.
Yeah, I would just add that I think that all of these environmental topics are becoming more immediate with all of these disasters and things that are happening. People are starting to see the connections, and we're trying to help amplify that. But I do think there's stories that are going to be going untold and overlooked during this time. I think that one thing that's not being looked into maybe very much is what's happening with all of the environmental rollbacks that the Trump administration is implementing, and how are air quality permits being decided. We know that there's 2 virtual air quality permit hearings this week. Things like the taxation that you mentioned, I mean, those issues relate very closely to water shutoffs, which are an environmental health. Summarize the news. We don't report all of it ourselves. We also summarize the news weekly so that other people can just catch up and stay up to date.
Let's talk for a second about some of the big stuff that's been going on. The flooding up in Midland. Dow Chemical, is based up there, and they have some containment ponds that have been flooded, and possibly there's been some release into the Tittabawassee River and the Saginaw River. What's the latest on that story up there with Dow Chemical?
So from what I've seen, the company has not said that anything has been released from those containment ponds into the river. Some people are disputing that. I've seen representatives from the Sierra Club saying that, they question what the company is saying, but, we don't know what was in those containment ponds exactly. It doesn't sound like, and it hasn't been demonstrated that stuff has moved out of the containment ponds. But kind of having followed this issue on the Detroit River with the Revere dock collapse, one of the big things with that, when, part of just the riverbank collapsed into the river this past winter, was people were really worried about what was on the site. But, perhaps even more important was the fact that all this toxic sediment was being stirred up from the riverbed itself. And so it might turn out that in Midland, it's toxic sediment in the river that is the bigger deal. And people talk about this like Superfund site that might have been breached by this flood. but that Superfund site is actually like 50 miles of river from Midland to the Saginaw Bay. So you're not talking about one isolated area. You're talking about this whole system of rivers and bottomlands that may have contained toxic sediment or might now contain toxic sediment. So I think it's, from what I'm hearing anyway, it's going to take months to figure out what the situation is actually there, or actually like there, and there's going to have to be a lot of sampling.
Superfund, just in case people don't know what that is, what is a Superfund site?
It's a designation for cleanup, basically, that you get money from the federal government. It's just a classification for a very polluted area. Is there anything you want to add to that, Nina?
Well, there's a special federal program
Right.
with money allocated to clean up these sites, and a lot of them have been cleaned up, and a lot of them have not been cleaned up or have not been completely cleaned up. So it just kind of varies, but they're all over the place. If you look for a map of Superfund sites, you'll probably see ones not too far from where you live. These are usually historically contaminated sites, chemical contamination from industry before a lot of the laws that we have on now were set in place.
So did I hear you say that we don't know what's actually in the containment ponds or the Superfund site? Or Nina, you mentioned a map. Do these maps that show Superfund site locations give any kind of a history?
Sure,
there?
we should be able to take a good look at what is in that Superfund site, what the history has been there, what cleanup activities have taken place, and whether floodwaters would impact some of those contaminants. A lot of times the contaminants would either be removed or encased in place. So the question is, and I don't know of anybody who's looked at it. I don't know if you do, Brian, what inundation might do to that Superfund site. I don't know the answer. As far as a map of Superfund sites, I just mean that there's locations all across the United States of these designated Superfund sites. So they're really everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. This site, I feel like it's kind of misleading to call it a site because it's actually like sort of this massive area, and it might contain any number of things like this stretch of the Tittabawassee and Saginaw rivers. But the primary thing that people seem to be worried about are dioxins, which are used in a lot of things. Kind of most notoriously, they were incorporated in Agent Orange. But yeah, we just don't know. And like, we don't know what's in the containment ponds, it doesn't sound like. And that wasn't something that Dow Chemical released, or they didn't tell people what was in those containment ponds.
Changing gears just a little bit, because it sounds like there's an awful lot that we don't know about what pollutants could be in play up there. I'll ask you one last question. How do we find out? Like, how do we find out? How do you find out? You're the experts at this.
Well, I think our first step would be to go look at what the history of these Superfund locations are. And that's a lot of it's publicly available information. As far as the containment ponds go, that's going to be a struggle. I would imagine that they're going to try to hold on to that information and keep it under wraps for as long as possible.
Yeah, I guess I would probably try and look and see what sort of sampling Eagle, Michigan, what is it? Michigan Department of Environment, Great
Lakes and Environment.
Oh my God, it's impossible. Michigan Eagle, formerly the Department of Environmental Quality. See what kind of sampling that they've done around that area as parts of like other remediation efforts. That's probably like the first place I would look. And that would probably give you an idea of some of the things that we're looking at. But it sounds like there are some researchers from U of M who are planning on doing further sampling. So other resources should be made available. And like, there are ongoing projects in this whole area. There are parks being built. A bunch of money was assigned from the settlement with Dow Chemical. So, people are probably going to be reinvestigating some sites that were already investigated so they can go forward with these projects, and that should give us more information.
Okay, so changing gears a little bit. The dam that failed, the Edenville Dam, was one of 4 dams owned by Boyce Hydro. Most people that have been following the news know that they lost their federal license to generate electricity in 2018, came under state oversight, and since the dam broke, there has been a lot of finger pointing and back and forth between the company and the state. And now lawsuits are starting to be filed this week. Can you clear up any of this for us? What's going on here? Like, what's the basic point that the state is making, and what's the basic point that Boyce Hydro is making, and what kind of sense can you make of it?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing is that they had their license taken away by federal authorities in 2018. So that tells us that this dam was not in good shape. So that's probably the most important piece of information for people to know, and that this dam that was not in good shape met with like some extreme flooding over a very short period of time. So the Army Corps of Engineers was saying that West Branch, Michigan, received, which is right near where these dams are, received between 4 and 7 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, which is like about as much rain as you might expect to get in a month. So when you have infrastructure in bad condition, meaning extreme weather like that, obviously things like this happen. I think what the dam operator is doing is trying to, say that Eagle is to blame because they wouldn't let more water out of the dam. Eagle is saying that, he just didn't want to invest in the equipment that he needed to maintain the dam in a safe manner. So, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about this in days to come. I don't have an exact answer on who's to blame for this, and probably nobody does at this point.
I think that
Do you feel like
answer of who's to...
Go on, Nina. Nina?
I think that... Can you hear me?
Yes. And now we can see you.
You got me? Okay. All right.
Yeah, we got you.
So dams are pretty complicated. I mean, the license to revoke the hydropower license was revoked because that dam did not have enough spillway capacity, right, to weather the storm that they knew could come. So when the dam was then given over to the state's regulatory authority, it actually met the state's regulatory authority. It met the state's rules, which only required it to have like half of the maximum flood potential. So we know that the state's laws or rules themselves are more lax than what the federal government wanted. But then we also saw some reporting that there was action taken on behalf of the state towards the dam operator for lowering the water levels because they were killing mussels. So there's wildlife interests at play. Meanwhile, anybody who bought property on that Wixom Lake is not going to want to see those water levels go down because that's why they bought that property. So you're going to see a whole lot of finger pointing. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how these things play out legally and in the courts. A lot of these decisions need to be made going forward. The problem with dams, I think, in Michigan and elsewhere is that they're extremely expensive and there's no return on investment. There's no benefit to owning a dam, and there's no way to make the investment in infrastructure pay off. So the only way that dam improvements like the one that could have been made on Edenville Dam that may have averted the flood is likely to be either dam removal, which environmental activists advocate for, or improving the infrastructure. In either case, it's likely to require some kind of public subsidy to make those things happen, because the people who own these dams, mostly private owners, just don't have the capital to do it.
That's a really good point that you make, and I didn't think about that before. I wonder if the point being that you said there's no profit in owning a dam, or basically it's very expensive, it's complicated, and there's no way that a private dam owner can make the proper investment in a dam and then see a return on that investment. Do you feel like maybe, I mean, one of my concerns here is that, you know, when Boise Hydro said, look, we wanted to lower the water level and the state wouldn't let us because it would kill the freshwater mussels, it kind of seemed like it was turning into one of those economic growth, business versus the environment kind of things. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I'm wondering, will things like the flood in Midland and y'all have this really great interactive map up right now on your website of all of the high hazard dams in the state of Michigan. And so you can go on that. I went on there today and I'm like, I wonder if there are any near me. We have this.
We're there?
Yeah, you there?
Yeah.
We have
we're there.
Yeah. So, near me, not too close. No, not really.
Okay.
But there are quite a few more not too far from me than I realized. The question is, we've known that infrastructure needs work in Michigan for a long time. Do we have a moment where we can talk about infrastructure improvements in this state while also talking about doing it in a way that's environmentally sustainable and friendly? You kind of mentioned that a little bit, Nina, when you said a lot of people just like to see us take the dams out altogether, environmentalists certainly, but can this be a moment where we can find forward and bring infrastructure and environment together in this state? What do you think?
Who's going to pay for it? I think that's the issue. I mean, it'd be nice. It's not only dams, it's roads, it's sewers, it's pretty much everything that you don't see that makes the urban systems that we have possible, and they're all degrading, and we have not agreed on a way to pay for them, and unfortunately, and so that's a great thing. Does it make it urgent enough? I don't know. I'm not super optimistic about it. Sorry.
Yeah. Brian, do you have some optimism for us?
No, I think it's going to be a pretty tough problem to fix, but it's going to only get more urgent. I mean, we're going to keep seeing this kind of extreme weather, and it's going to keep coming up against like increasingly aging infrastructure. I don't know what the number was, but there was an article from the Free Press a couple years ago that was saying like it was like 2,000 something dams were going to be at the end of their design life this year. So basically, they weren't built to exist past this point, and yet they're still there. So it seems like something really does have to happen.
Is there because I know that there have been a lot of dams. When I say a lot, I don't have a number, but it seems like removing dams has become a thing that is done with increasing frequently in recent years. Is there much resistance to that idea in Michigan? I have to assume that a lot of these man-made lakes have property owners on them.
Oh yeah, there can be for sure. If there are property owners, a lot of these dams are owned by lake associations, and they're regulated by these court orders that regulate legal lake levels. How high does the lake legally have to be in the summer and winter? So I think if you talk to the different watershed councils, which have often been the groups that have led those dam removal efforts, you'll hear a lot of stories about people getting very angry about you changing the water regime in those areas. There's some success stories like in Chelsea, west of Ann Arbor, where they removed the dam and now they have kind of a nice river, free-flowing river there. There's other areas where even small dams that hardly anybody saw, but it affected just a few homeowners. I'm thinking of one in the northern Oakland County area that was removed by the Clinton River Watershed Council, nearly caused a lawsuit. In any case, caused a lot of hostility, and they had, I think it was federal funding to remove that dam. So yes, there's a lot of opposition to it. And in cases like this, where there's so much potential damage, maybe the stakes are different, but a lot of these are just kind of smaller dams too.
Well, let's go from dams to utilities. There's been a lot of news, about DTE and the settlement that DTE reached with the Environmental Protection Agency. Tell us, what is that all about, and why should Michiganders care?
Yeah, so there was a lawsuit filed in 2010 by the Environmental Protection Agency and the Sierra Club against DTE, and they were saying that DTE was flouting air pollution controls, violating the Clean Air Act. And just this last week, those lawsuits were settled, and a few outcomes. So DTE agreed to pay not only a fine, but also some mitigation money to do community projects in the 48217 area in Southwest Detroit, and other areas that have been impacted by air pollution, including things like converting buses to electric to reduce air pollution in those areas. But I think the kind of most surprising thing we found on Friday was that the DTE Energy also agreed to actually retire 3 of its 5 coal plants by 2022, which is crazy soon. So I think what we'll be following up on with that story is what is the plan for replacing that capacity, the electric generation capacity in Southeast Michigan.
Is there would this case set any kind of precedent that you think will turn up again in the next few years? I mean, COVID-19, for example, y'all have on planetdetroit.org right now a story about air pollution being linked to COVID-19. So can you foresee more lawsuits like this? And can you see results similar to this happening on a wider scale in the years ahead?
Well, I don't know. I can't predict the future. But I mean, this lawsuit was, 2010, so it took almost 10 years, or more than 10 years to settle. It's very hard to link environmental pollution to health outcomes. It's very difficult. In both of these settlements, DTE Energy admitted no wrongdoing. So I think it's going to remain a challenge to go after polluters for any kind of health outcomes. However, I think, I do feel like we're at a bit of an inflection point with understanding of the relationships between air pollution and public health. And so we'll see. I mean, maybe some of it will be lawsuits, maybe some of it will be, companies realizing it's no longer in their economic best interest to continue to pursue fossil fuels. I think we're seeing just a little bit of that starting to happen with the integrated resource plans that have been put forth this year. The one that DTE originally put forth was rejected, and they came back with another one that was a little bit greener, though not as green as I think a lot of advocates would want to see. So I think that we're, inexorably trending in this direction of greener electricity and energy sources, but it seems like it just takes a lot of damage, and the bar for evidence is very high.
So what, two more questions here. Those are the big stories in Michigan right now that we covered today. What are some news stories that you see developing, or what are some stories that you're going to be watching closely and that you think other people should be watching closely too over the next few weeks and months?
Well, I was going to say that, and this is not a specific answer to this question, but I think with everything right now, it's just kind of how things overlap with COVID. And we're facing different disasters, whether it's a dam failing or a heat wave or flooding or something else, and we have to deal with those, which would be a really difficult thing to deal with anyway. But now we're dealing with them in a time of social distancing, and it just seems like it's much more difficult to make decisions about all of these things, and people are going to be learning a lot of things on the fly. And so I think paying attention to those things, paying attention to what people are doing and is working, I think is going to be an important part of our work for the foreseeable future.
Nina, what do you think? Nina, you still there?
Hello?
Oh,
hey, Nina.
Hey.
Can't hear me?
Welcome back.
Hey! Where did I go? I was here the whole time.
I don't know. Technology.
We can't let all of our stories we're working on go out there because, we want to be the first to report on them. But I can tell you a little bit about some projects that we're working on. So we have some funding to report on environmental justice. So we will be launching a texting platform soon to have people, it's called Ask Planet Detroit, and we're asking people to text us their questions about the environment. So I hope you'll help us share that with people and make sure that we are able to help answer people's questions. And also we have a partnership with Graham Media Group to do and report on some citizen science this summer. So we'll be having some ways that people can engage with the environment and help contribute to some actual science projects that are happening. So more info on planetdetroit.org.
I just shared that on our Facebook comments. All right, so last question today. You all got any good news? We could use some good news. You got any good news?
My kids just brought me some Dairy Queen.
What's that?
My kids just brought me some Dairy Queen.
That is good news. What's in that bag?
I don't know.
What's in there? Is it a blizzard?
I'm hoping it's a blizzard. Yeah, it's a blizzard.
What kind of blizzard do you eat?
Better have peanut butter cups in it.
There you go. That's my blizzard right there. Peanut butter cup. Haven't had one yet this summer, but today seems like a good day for it.
Yep.
Brian, do you have a blizzard or some other good news?
I don't have a blizzard. No one brought me Dairy Queen. I don't know if I have a ton of good news to share, but it's been great to get out in the garden this week, and I'd say, hopefully if that can be, one upside of this for some people is, if you have a space to grow something and that's a safe thing to do, I feel like that's a good outlet for a lot of people right now. And I've been talking to a lot of my friends about that. So it's something I'm thankful for anyway.
Yeah, and Brian has a nice article on Planet Detroit about how to make the most of your COVID victory garden.
That's right. That's right. He does. I've read it. So planetdetroit.org, everybody. Go check it out. Brian, Nina, thank you so much for spending half an hour with us on a Tuesday afternoon. And thank you for all the work you're doing to report on some really important stories and keep us all well informed here in the environmental justice community. We look forward to having you back sometime.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. And for those of you watching at home, this episode has been recorded, and we'll share that on our YouTube channel. You can learn more about Planet Detroit at planetdetroit.org. I encourage you to go subscribe today. It is the best source for environmental news in Michigan, and we are very proud to support them at Voices for Earth Justice. Brian mentioned getting out in the garden, and we are really getting going on our garden at VEJ over at Hope House and Gardens, taking down a couple more trees, doubling the size of our garden this year. All of the food that we grow will be donated to Brightmoor Connection Food Pantry to help feed people who are being affected by COVID-19 and the economic fallout. If you were with us earlier today, we'll be installing 2 bees in the deep beehives. So we don't have all the volunteer opportunities we normally do every summer, but we are still able to take small groups. If you're looking for a garden where you can come learn or just get your hands in the soil, or even learn how to be a beekeeper, learn more about that at voicesforearth.org. You see that scrolling below. And we hope that we get to see you out in the fresh air and sunshine working in our garden sometime this summer. It's been a pleasure hosting you once again. We look forward to seeing you back here next Tuesday. Stay tuned to our Facebook page to find out who our guest is going to be in a week. And let us know how we can serve and support you as you pray, learn, and take action on behalf of Earth. Thank you. Make it a great day.